Say goodbye to manually recording hours and chasing down late payments. With LawPay Pro, a new solution from LawPay, you can reclaim billable hours and get paid faster with all the billing and invoicing features you need in one easy-to-use tool. Plus, plans start as low as $19 per month per user. In the words of a LawPay Pro test user, with these features at this price, purchasing LawPay Pro was a no-brainer. Discover why there are so many reasons to love LawPay Pro at lawpay.com/dcbar.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brief Encounters. This podcast is being hosted by myself, Adaku Nwachukwu. I am a member of the Law Practice Management Committee, and I would like to introduce Nancy Rapp. And Nancy, thank you for being here today on the podcast. And would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hi, Adaku. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. As you mentioned, my name is Nancy Rapp, and I'm actually a former attorney. I'm an attorney turned legal marketing consultant, you might say. I work for a company called Paper Street Web Design and Marketing, and we actually are an attorney focused company. But more importantly, my background, my training, and all of that is how lawyers can create an effective website, how they can use that website to carry out their brand. And then I can also explain how to implement what marketing strategies would be working best for your firm, because it's not a one size fits all type thing, as you might imagine, just as every practice is different, every budget is different, every location is different. And all of these things really come into consideration with how to plan your website and marketing. And hopefully I'll be able to provide the listeners with some tips and some pointers to really keep in mind when they analyze their own website and their own marketing.
And that's perfect. And I hope that we have the opportunity to get to all of those points. So I started my practice almost 3 years ago. And one of the things that I had a question about is, where do you start if you're starting your own legal practice on the marketing side? And this question is geared to the smaller practices. What are the things that you should think about when marketing your new firm?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Honestly, one of the first things you really need to do is go to a site, something as simple as GoDaddy.com, and find a domain that works for you. Because a lot of times, some attorneys have to, depending on the states that they're in, go in and choose one based on their name and their title. For other practices, it doesn't matter, but you have to find some sort of URL that's comparable to what you would want to say. So whether it's dcpersonalinjurylawyer.com or nancyraplaw.com, something like that. So then once you have a hosting provider, a domain provider, I should say, that's when you really have to draw your attention to the actual website. Because before anything else, before you hand out a business card, before you post yourself on Facebook, people want to see that you actually have a website. So your website is really the most important element of your marketing campaign. And then I usually say to start different phases. But most importantly, with your website, the things you really have to think about is you say, okay, I'm going to have a website. The next thing I have to think about is, what's my aesthetic? Am I going to be timeless? Am I going to start to try to make a theme with my website? Do I want to be bold? Do I want to be eye-catching? Or am I a solo practitioner? I need to get myself out there. I need a website up and running fast. So I'm just going to do some pretty basic design elements. If you're going for the basic design elements to get yourself up and running faster, there's absolutely no harm in doing so. You just have to work and make sure that your content is up and where it needs to be. So what we look at when we're looking for content for a law firm's website is your homepage. Do you say what you do? Do you say your practice areas clearly? Do you have your office hours? Is there a contact form for someone to contact you? Then once you've expanded that past the homepage, then it's things like your bio, which usually is pretty easy for a lot of the attorneys. It's basically where you went to school, what your legal interests are, and things like that. And then the last part is your practice area breakdown, because a lot of times many attorneys kind of get tunnel vision and say, well, if I tell everyone I'm a personal injury lawyer, they'll know that I could handle their car case. Or if I'm an estate planning lawyer, they'll know I can handle their probate claim. And that's really not how it works, because a lot of times people are overwhelmed when they're looking for an attorney, or they simply don't realize what elements of law they need to be thinking about. So I always try to say, okay, what claims do you handle? And do you have at least 500 words explaining how you can help someone in those legal scenarios? And that's really the starting point. A basic design, usually we recommend WordPress because it's the least headache oriented. And then, like I said, taking it and explaining yourself via your content. Once you have those basics, then you can start exploring, do you want to get fancier with your design? Or are you going to tackle things such as marketing for Google, marketing for social media, and taking it from there?
And so, if you are this established firm that has been around for 5 years, 10 years, maybe you're looking for a rebrand or you notice the workflow is decreasing and you just want to get a refresh, a reboot. What do you advise that those larger firms should do on the marketing side?
Absolutely. First and foremost is take a look at your actual website because sometimes these law firms are in business 5, 10 years and their website is 5, 10 years old. Is your website mobile responsive? Have you done an ADA compliance check lately? Is your website readable on big screens or little screens or cell phones or iPads? These are important things because we're finding that no matter where your potential client is coming from, they're probably double screening. So it could be at office when they're comparing you and another firm. It could be during a meeting or it could be at home when your potential client's sitting at home. If the basics of your website are there, then you have to think about your brand. Okay. Are you maintaining the same brand? Do you want to freshen it up? Are you willing to go with the times a little bit? For example, we're seeing a lot now with law firm websites that they're getting more into color. They're getting more into being a little eye catching or bolder. If that's not for you, that's fine. You can keep going to step three. If it is for you, then definitely by all means try to get a different brand that's eye catching. If you're like, let's say business to business, if you're a corporate lawyer, things like that, some of our attorneys are a little more hesitant to do something like that. So then I say to them, okay, if you're not getting the clients that you want, or you're not seeing the business that you need, are you really marketing yourself effectively with your website? And here again, the attorneys usually balk and say, no, we don't want to pay for ads. We're word of mouth. We don't need any of that. And I say, absolutely. But are you marketing yourself with something we call content marketing? Do you have expertise explicitly showing on your website? For example, do you have something that's a way to indicate representative clients or representative transactions? You may not be able to list your exact clients or who you're helping, but do you at least say the matters that you're doing? Do you at least indicate the areas of your top claims or something like that? Do you have a blog? And again, here again, all the attorneys cringe when I mention something like a blog, but a blog does not have to be as salacious as something you'd see on YouTube or TikTok. It could just be legal insights. It could just be things that are industry news. Are they talking about what your sector should be thinking about? Are you advising others of what they need to know? Again, if you're business in business, talk about legal changes, talk about things you're seeing in the claims you're facing. If you're something that's a multi-practice firm, make sure that you're not targeting just one area. We do find that some of these larger firms pigeonhole themselves. Yes, all of our money comes in on the intellectual property side, but are you getting business through family law too? Perhaps you're only looking at your IP claims because those are your breadwinners, your money makers, but are you marketing yourselves well across the board? It's things like that to really take an examination of, are you promoting yourself properly? And then if you think your actual website content's strong, that's when I say, okay, let's turn to the more fancier or the more eye-catching models of marketing, whether it be using LinkedIn more, whether it be creating videos like a branding video or an explainer video or something along those lines. But I always say start as small as possible. Start at your actual website, then see what your website is presenting, and then start reaching to external factors for your marketing.
So you brought up some really great points. Again, as a solo practitioner, I really appreciate everything you're saying. And my practice is more B2B. So this last part that you discussed is something that I do appreciate. But what would the difference be if a firm is focusing on individuals and is more of a, civil litigation or even criminal law practice area? How is it different than B2B firms?
It's a little easier in terms of the family law and criminal laws in terms of how to market. But it's funny because while how to market is easier, the competition's often steeper.
Right.
So it's kind of like give and take on both sides. That's why I said it's no real easy way to apply all marketing concepts to all lawyers. But if you're doing something what I like to call the people-centered law, civil lit, family law, criminal law,
Mhm.
what you need to make sure is your website a guide and is it informative and engaging? Meaning, just telling someone that you can represent them in a criminal defense case. Do you help prepare them for those cases? Do you tell them what the court experience is going to be like? Do you outline the different options? Do you outline the penalties? Is your bio perhaps a little more approachable and not just a person who lists where they went to law school? For someone in criminal law or personal injury law, those testimonials, those client results, things like that, those are critical because otherwise you're just basically putting out the same information that everyone else has. Everyone else is going to say the same things about car accidents. Were you at fault? How much at fault? Things like that. So what you really need to do is inject some sort of personality and some amount of educational principles. So that way a person can read your site and say, you're right, that is what I need to deal with. That's how that person can help me. On the flip side, you can also gain more clients that way because you may be able to gain clients who are not at the immediate click of hiring an attorney at that point. So, for example, like let's say someone was in a car accident and they don't know if they can sue for damages. What they're going to do is they're going to look at their type of car accident claim. Perhaps they weren't the person who was supposed to be driving the car, or perhaps they know they weren't wearing their seatbelt. So what they'll do is they'll go online and do just something like a Google search or social media search or even a video search on YouTube or TikTok for something who's in a similar situation to them. So what you need to do is try to get clients in that realm of their decision-making process as well, because if you can answer their questions right away, you'll earn a sense of trust and they'll be more familiar with your law firm and say, hey, I remember that website mentioned that they can help me at this point or that how I know how at fault I'd be. So let me try contacting them. So it's a little bit more necessary to be a step ahead of your potential clients for in people-centered law, as I call it.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. What I'm wondering now is whether you're on the B2B side or straight to individuals representing them in their various types of cases. What's the next step after you have your website? So you have your blog, the website has the practice areas, testimonials, the bio, everything is looking great. Now, how do you get people to look at your website?
That is phase one. What I generally say is phase two is to consider some form of more aggressive marketing. Usually, that is what people tend to call either pay per click, which is Google Ads, or SEO. I'm a little biased in that I got my start in SEO, search engine optimization, and I've really seen I've been doing it for about 10 years. So I tend to think that that is a very good way to go for most lawyers. Because what that really does is you're actively targeting clients via search engines like Bing and Google, which means, yes, you may have some clients who come to you by way of word of mouth, but you're really trying to get clients by way of people who are searching for you. In fact, I was just speaking to a law firm this morning. I'm going to disguise who they were a little bit so that way I don't give any information, but they actually represent school systems. And we'll say that they're in Texas. So they're a Texas law firm that represents school systems, but the school systems don't always know what lawyers they should talk to for that. So when they're doing something like that, they're just going to do a very basic search. Who's a school board lawyer? Who helps school negotiations? Who helps special education law? And that is when you have to start applying something called search engine optimization techniques in order to be the person whose law firm pops up first for something like that. Now, SEO, unfortunately, is a lot more complicated than people realize. It is about having content, so that's a step of the battle. But there are technical elements, your speed, your image load time. There's things like how your text has to be formatted, because believe it or not, you need X amount of headings. You need things called title tags and meta descriptions. And then there's actually off-site marketing that you need to do for search engine optimization. What that means is you have to get referral sites back to you. So are you a part of Martindale Hubbell's network? Are you a part of Avvo? If you're part of the obvious ones, are you perhaps part of the more less obvious groups and organizations? Can you contribute to Attorney at Law magazine? anything along those lines to help build up your website in the mind of Google bots. I mean, it sounds as crazy as it is, but that's how it works. These bots are looking for sites that they're going to deem relevant, and they're going to be looking for these, what we call SEO elements, the on page stuff, the technical stuff, and the link building stuff, which is that offsite stuff that I mentioned, in order to get yourself to rank higher. There is also just very simply paying on Google to have yourself in an ad. I mean, if you represent school boards, then by all means put up an ad for that if that's what you feel comfortable doing. Unfortunately, though, if you're like, let's say, a personal injury lawyer, if your fees for Google ads are going to be astronomical, especially like if you're in a major city or something like that. Like I can tell you, our Los Angeles pay-per-click market is huge. Their budgets, unfortunately, are very high. So that's an option. And it's always worth getting a quote to see if you would be in a range of a doable price for something like a Google ad. But to me, like I said, SEO is a little more friendly in terms of the budget. And it's a little more well rounded in that perhaps someone maybe looked for the wrong thing. So the ad that popped up is incorrect. But when you do SEO, you can have a broader sense of what you're targeting with your potential audience and maybe get your clicks that way. I'll pause there in case there's lots of questions there.
No, I actually don't have a lot of questions. You explained it very well, and the distinction between just having a straight Google ad and then actually using search engine optimization.
Perfect. The last part of the game, really, the big portion of the game,
Phase three.
well, phase three-ish, I would say. Phase three, and then there's a phase four. But phase three is really social media. All lawyers should have some form of social media in terms of sharing at least their legal insights or their blogs on social media. But if you feel that you have an active SEO or pay-per-click ad, some sort of campaign that way,
Right.
you really need to make sure that your social media is doing what it should be doing. And unfortunately, I see a lot of law firms that come to me like, yeah, absolutely, we have a social media person. And then I go to look at their social media, and there's two generic traps that I see every time. There's the firms that do nothing but post their accomplishments, super lawyers, best lawyers, all of that, just nonstop. And while that's great every once in a while, people tune it out. You're just saying how wonderful you are. You're not offering anything to your potential client in the sense of having convinced them that you can help them. You're just saying, yes, we're great. But to them, that may all they may see is, well, they're probably going to charge or high attorney's fees or something like that. You need to have a campaign that's explaining your insights, that's showcasing your workers, that's showcasing your other attorneys, just showcasing your cases, having something on social media, particularly LinkedIn, because that's, like I said, that's first and foremost where you should be marketing. But what are you doing to make someone catch their eye? Simply, are you posting images on LinkedIn? Do you have a template that showcases your brand name? Things like that. So that's track number one I see with social media is just generic PR posts. And then the other side is a lot of times I see clients who have someone who does social media that quite frankly does not know a thing about the law. And, they'll be posting things like, Thirsty Thursday or Happy Friday. Yes, it's wonderful to have like those personal or humorous posts every once in a while. But, lawyers need to have a little bit of a different standard. Sure, you can showcase your pets. That way it shows that you're a human, not just an attorney. But it should really be more insightful than just simple social media. So, like I said, social media is particularly difficult for lawyers because it has to be done a certain way to be effective. So, it's kind of a blend of what you would see from the average Joe's personal social media account and something strictly corporate.
Right.
And then, even then, when you're using social media, it's always important to note that social media does not bring home the bacon, so to speak. That's why I think for me, social media is always at least phase three, because social media is really for branding and helping yourself stand out in the lawyer pool. But you're not going to have a very strong campaign that's going to bring in thousands of potential clients. If you get a few clients from social media, that should be your goal and that you should feel comfortable with. But the bigger numbers for clients, if you're looking to attract more, that needs to come from SEO or pay per click.
Okay. I have a question about the difference between a law firm social media page and then maybe an individual's professional social media page. Is there something that should be different when it comes to just a law firm's social media page versus an individual's professional pages?
Yeah, what I generally suggest is the law firm page is going to be the one that's more sticking to the firm in the sense of the insights are going to come from the attorneys themselves. The news is going to come from the attorney, like, talking about the firm and things like that. For the
Mhm.
individual who's a lawyer trying to promote their firm, in addition to what the firm is doing, you can think a little more outside of your firm. So, if you have a news headline on CNN that connects something to what you do for a living, share that. Engage more on social media. Don't be afraid to like a post that truly is relevant. Connect to individuals in your community. For example, if you do criminal law or something like that and you just see something, a law changing or something that someone posts, don't be afraid to comment on it. You can be a little more personal on your own social media account, assuming, like I said, it falls within ethical guidelines and everything else,
Right.
but you're not as married to the law firm itself and what it is that you promote or what it is you comment on. Anything. I mean, it could even simply be just promoting your son or daughter's school. If they had a championship meet, you don't be afraid on your personal social media to say "great job," because your personal social media page is what someone's going to look at to get to know you, not just the firm itself. So it's okay to show who you are in that professional capacity wherever your son or daughter goes to school. That's okay. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be afraid of with promoting a news article or something like that. So you can be a little more relaxed in what it is you post, as long as, like I said, as long as it's still professional and still showing you in the best light possible. Like I said, and if you are allowed to do things like political commentary, you can. We generally don't advise it too much. Yes, your social media is your own, but you never want to do anything that you'll regret later down the line. So we always just say take those with a grain of salt, but as long as you can keep other things to yourself and just be simply a little more personal that way, you should be fine.
Okay. That sounds good. So, what's the last phase in the whole marketing process?
Last phase is the bonus elements, what I like to call them. If you have the ability, for example, to pay for a branding video that discusses who you are and your firm accolades and things like that, those are wonderful. If you can do an explainer video that breaks down legal topics, so let's say you're a probate lawyer or an immigration lawyer and you're trying to reach more clients, perhaps making a video that explains a difficult process is great to them. This is also where even print materials still come into play. A lot of attorneys become so focused on digital marketing that they forget about the effectiveness of print. You can still have a print ad. There are still reasons to have brochures. For example, an exit pamphlet is wonderful for your clients because it gives them something to hold on to with your contact information. It could perhaps remind them to leave a review and things like that. These things are definitely not required, and you can be a very successful law firm without these bonuses things, these videos, these brochures, digital PDFs, to send to other clients. But those, like I said, don't get carried away with the extraneous materials if you don't find that you have traffic to your website or followers on social media. Try to do whatever is best with those areas first and then take care of the last. If you are a very niche lawyer, have your own podcast. It's fantastic because fortunately for lawyers, not everyone is jumping on the podcast bandwagon, so to speak, yet. So it's still plenty of room for you to be on the web talking about niche areas in your practice or something like that. So, like I said, those are the things. There's always more that you can do to market your campaign. And that's, like I said, that's why I like to talk to the clients one on one, because I like to say, okay, well, if you've done this and this, there is no end of the road. It's a question of how else can you grow yourself, brand yourself, that people are still looking for, that people could still make use of, and would still be a grab in some sense of the word.
Sounds great. You've basically laid out a roadmap for whether it's solo, a law firm that's starting up, or an established law firm. You've laid the roadmap for how to be successful in the field of legal marketing. So before we go, I would definitely love to get your top two to dos and your top two do not do's. Don't do this. So, first of all, what are your top two? Please do these things when you're marketing.
My top two things you absolutely have to do are number one, take a look at who you think are your top five competitors in your area. Because chances are, never copy another attorney's website or anything like that. But, if you say to yourself, gee, I wonder if my potential client is going to Smith Law Firm in the city instead of me, see what they're doing that you're not doing, because that is always a great window into who your potential clients are comparing you with. So if, for example, the Smith Law Firm has videos, that could be a factor. So think about adding videos to your site. Or if you notice they don't have a strong social media campaign, maybe you want to start one. You need to make sure that you are on par in your community. So if your website is like ancient compared to those in your city or your biggest competitors, that's what you need to fix. So you need to really keep an eye on your competitors. And then I think the other top do that I would place on my list is have people who are not lawyers examine what you have to say on your website and how it looks. The way that lawyers do focus groups for like testimonies at trials and things like that, your website's really no different. Would someone say, take a look at your website and say, wow, no, it's too much legalese. I don't know what you're doing. Or, well, I don't really know if I could have a claim. Have a few people who aren't lawyers just take a quick look at your website. Probably not family members, but family members are still great. But just really people who can look to see and say to yourself, okay, well, this is what I think could possibly improve either my website. If your website's doing great, you could say the same thing for your social media. So that way, it's like social media, content, and website, have someone who's not a lawyer look at your material, because though we may be helping other lawyers with our caseload, probably a large portion of us may even just be helping corporations or things like that. So have just someone outside our windows or our box take a look at that stuff.
Those are two really great points that anybody can do at any time, whether at the early stages of your marketing process or at a later stage when you're optimized. So that's great advice. So obviously now, what are the top two things law firms should not do when they're marketing?
The first and foremost thing I think you should never ever do is never say that you're done. Like, okay, we spent $50,000 on marketing this year. We're done now for the next 5 years. It doesn't work that way. An ongoing legal marketing campaign needs to have an ongoing budget. So you can't blow it all at once, nor should you think you're ever done. Because with SEO, for example, the algorithms change. So your site could be optimized one year, but the next year, Google changed what it's looking for. It's not optimized anymore. Social media, you say, okay, well, I created this great campaign this year. I don't have to think about it next year. No, because maybe your competitors are adding more videos. Or maybe you had a great website 5 years ago that you invested $50,000 in, but you know what? Now all the lawyers are doing casual shots. You can't ever say to yourself, my legal marketing is done. So you always need to maintain some sort of budget ongoing for your marketing. And unfortunately, I meet with too many clients who've done this. Oh, well, last year we did X, Y, and Z, so we have no money this year. Well, unfortunately, you may have to spend to grow, whether it's just to make more videos, whether it's better photography, whether it's money on ads. There has to be some funds available to make whatever changes are necessary. And then I think the other big never do that I have the most concerns with is just never side with the local person to help you unless you're really convinced they're the best. Too many times I have someone tell me, well, we hired our friend to do our social media, but no, they didn't have legal experience. Or, oh, we hired someone in our city to do our website, but they made it look, I mean, I had someone who added glitter to their website just because they were a local designer and that's what they thought. Never just rely on a local connection. Do your homework. Interview a lot of companies. Make sure that whoever it is you're going to work for truly has expertise in law and isn't just going to do Thirsty Thursday social media posts or something like that. Because like I said, unfortunately in this day and age, too many people can create a wonderful spell and tell you, oh yes, I know social media. Here's what I do, or here's SEO and here's what I do. But it's really not the best practices. So going local or going with the friend you have to try to save a dollar or two may cost a lot more money in the future. So if you have a friend or a colleague or someone that does these things professionally all the time, great. I haven't seen too many of those work out. So always try to do your homework before you settle on whoever it is going to help you.
Yep. And I have to say that last point I think is extremely important. As an attorney that has licenses in multiple jurisdictions and the jurisdictions having differing ethics rules, working with a marketing firm that is familiar with the fact that law firm and attorney advertising, is regulated in essence, right? And it could be different in different states. So I would even say that the second one is probably a priority of a don't do. Don't use a marketing company that is not familiar with the legal field because of those ethics rules. So I really do appreciate that point.
And like I said, the last part, with that too is try to rely on humans too. I know we're all enchanted by Chat GPT and all of that, but be careful if you're doing a bot to write your content too. To me, it's no different than hiring average Joe to write content or the Chat GPT, because you don't want to be generic. You don't want to be plagiarized. You don't want to do anything like that.
Right.
There is an absolute time and place for Chat GPT and all of that. But like I said, try to work with professionals who know legal marketing more so before you turn to the quick fixes. Because again, in my experience, the quick fixes very rarely solve the problem without causing more headaches.
More problems to fix later on. Absolutely. So Nancy, I think that's it for the questions that I had. Thank you so much for making time to chat with me today and to participate on this podcast for Brief Encounters and the Law Practice Management Committee. We love finding individuals who will help our DC Bar attorneys and any attorneys actually, as they're trying to manage the practice of law. So definitely appreciate the time.
Absolutely. This isn't really stuff that's covered in law school very much. And, unfortunately, promoting yourself and gaining yourself clients is such a huge part of practice management. And like I said, there aren't too many attorneys who really have the time and energy to really research and learn all this. So I'm always happy to help and explain everything. So it was really great to be here.
Our listeners, if they're interested in getting in contact with you about questions on this podcast or about the services you provide at Paper Street, we will provide the link so that they can contact you.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. Like I said, that's so often where most of our professionals can be found. I'm Nancy Rapp, R-A-P-P. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you could visit the Paper Street website, which is paperstreet.com. It's spelled like it sounds, paperstreet.com. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you so much for your time.
This episode of Brief Encounters was brought to you in part by our sponsor, LawPay. Discover why there are so many reasons to love LawPay Pro at lawpay.com/DCBar.